Well, hello, everybody. Greetings and a big welcome from all the writers of Notre Dame. And thanks so much for coming to the 2021 Sparks Prize reading. My name is Valerie Sayers, and I'm a faculty member in the Creative Writing Program, which awards the Sparks Prize annually to a distinguished graduating writer for a post-MFA year of residency and writing time. The prize is generously funded by Nicholas Sparks, a longtime supporter of our program. A special thanks to him. Every year, we ask an outside judge to choose the winner based on the quality of writing submitted and the likelihood that the submission will be developed into a publishable book. This year's judge was Janice Lee, the author of 7 innovative books, including her latest, Imagine a Death, and she clearly fell in love with Greg Havrilak's writing. As you probably know, he is a highly original and elegant writer, and it was my great pleasure to work with him closely when he was an MFA student. But I'm not the introducer. I'm only the introducer of the introducer. So I'm going to introduce that man, Bill Miller, and he will introduce Greg.
Thank you, Valerie. I am honored to introduce Greg tonight. Greg and I met a year and a half ago. Greg was teaching an introduction to fiction writing. I was a fellow of Notre Dame's Inspired Leadership Initiative who wanted to write. Greg wore a knit cap to class and was friendly and welcoming. I wore my bike helmet and was apprehensive. Another professor had rejected me for the class, maybe an interval of 54 years since freshman English and no fiction writing ever, implied odds stacked for failure. I didn't know and didn't care. I was just grateful to be in class. Greg had not only admitted me, but another inspired leadership septuagenarian as well. His response to the ILI office request to admit was, "The more, the merrier." My classmates were exceptional writers, including my fellow ILI student with 50 plus years writing as a journalist posted around the world. I had managed to graduate from Notre Dame the first time in 1969 with a liberal arts degree in economics, and without, at least in my memory, having written anything. The preceding tale is simply to emphasize that Greg not only is welcoming, but can teach anyone to write fiction. And for that, I am grateful. All of us writers in Greg's class, and I now include myself as a writer, became better. All wrote good stories. Some wrote very, very good stories. We learned of gerbils and gas stations and shapes and more. Famous authors spoke to us in essays and videos, always with a twinkle in their eyes. Greg, with the ever-present twinkle in his eye, taught and encouraged through examples of good, diverse, contemporary short stories. We writers wrote and learned from each other. Perhaps everyone else in class already understood, but I learned the writer has to entice the reader to the end. And the story, if it is a good story, the story is enough. But also there can be a truth, not the fact-checkable kind, not necessarily the writer's truth, but the reader can find a truth through a good story. That's what I found in the stories we read. That's what I found in Greg's story, our first serial killer. And that's why I'm looking forward to Greg introducing us to PK tonight. And with that, I turn it over to Greg.
Thanks so much, Bill. That was lovely. Bill Miller was a standout in the first fiction class that I taught here at Notre Dame. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. A Notre Dame alum and economics major, Bill returned to South Bend as a fellow in Notre Dame's Inspired Leadership Initiative. I had 2 fellows in my class that first term. Patricia Lefevre is also here tonight. Thank you, Patricia. And I'm so glad that they joined us that term. If you didn't know, the Inspired Leadership Initiative is a program that gives accomplished, talented people a chance to return to school after years in the workforce to challenge themselves anew with coursework at a world-class university. The energy and enthusiasm and insight Bill and Patricia brought to every class was inspiring. I know the first years were impressed, but that's kind of the point. So those of you, those MFAers who will be teaching creative writing next fall, if you get an email from Joan Ball, who's also here in attendance tonight, in early August asking if you'll accept a fellow in your class, do consider it. You have the right to turn them down, people do. But coming from someone who was rejected by over 40 MFA programs, why not give them a chance? There might be a talented writer and a new friend in it for you. Thanks again, Valerie. Thank you, Bill. Okay, so on to my novel. The Sparks year, and that's exactly how I think of it, gave me a second chance at a novel I gave up on years ago. The book is called PK, which is short for Priest's Kid, and it's set in 1986 in Queens, New York, in a neighborhood called Jackson Heights. If you haven't heard of it, Jackson Heights is one of the most culturally diverse neighborhoods in the world. They say 160 languages are spoken in less than a 10-block radius. I grew up there. I went to public schools there and have wanted to write about it for a long time. This year was my chance. One last note, the chapter headings in PK all come from pop 80s songs. The chapter I'm going to read for you is called Sunday, Bloody Sunday. It is the opening track on U2's 1983 album, War. Sunday, Bloody Sunday. 3 days after saving my friend Jisoo from concussion, brain damage, or worse, and because I bashed a kid's head in to do it, almost getting kicked out of school, my 3rd near expulsion, I break the streak. It's been 6.5 days since I did it, 154 hours, just 14 shy of a week. Considering my record is 13 days, 7 hours, and 2 minutes, I'm surprised I lasted that long. After the fight, they dragged me to a waiting room off the principal's office, so tiny I'd always thought it was a broom closet, and double locked me in. I knew they were calling the parents, maybe lawyers, and figured I'd be there a while. But it only took 20 minutes. By 3 o'clock, Ross's office was packed with flushed, angry faces. Mom was there, Jisoo and his dad, and Goldberg, the bear of a dean who'd ripped me off the kid's chest mid-thumb, along with Principal Ross and Andrea. At first, I was surprised to see Andrea standing with the glowering men. She's a researcher from Teachers College and not really a member of the staff. But I guess since she's been following our class for a year, trying to figure out why kids who don't speak English at home, whose parents drive taxis or run dry cleaners and dim sum shops on Queens Boulevard, or those bodegas with the Corona neons all throughout Jackson Heights, have such high reading and math scores, she knew me as well as anyone there. Maybe better. Walking into Ross's office, I saw Andrea first. I could tell from the way her mouth set when she saw me, how her shoulders flared and she spread her feet wide, as if ready to take a punch, that she was there for me, that she had my back and was ready to fight. Then I saw Mom, seated and nervous, shaking her head in disbelief. I knew she hated being there, but really had no choice, because if my father found out, he might have killed me. I knew she would have left Benji with a neighbor, a sweet old Greek woman who fed him spanakopita until he vomited, and that she would have taken Roosevelt Ave, following the 7 train the whole way, and at each red light she'd tear into her fingernails like she was starving. A bad habit, but could you blame her? I mean, how many times would I put her through this? Mom saw me and turned away, like she just couldn't bear to look. Instantly, my throat bunched up. Something heavy fell through my chest. I knew I was ready to cry, and my first thought was to run out of there, let them decide without me. Maybe they already had. Thank God, after telling me to sit, they asked for Jisoo's version first. There wasn't much to tell. One minute he's milling out the front entrance with 200 other kids, maybe a tenth of our middle school student body they let out in stages at dismissal. And the next he's being thrown to the ground for bumping into the wrong guy, which, I mean, how could you not? But the guy, seeing Jisoo with the other top track geeks, just another little Asian kid with a ridiculously large backpack, flings him down, jumps on his chest, and grabbing the hair on the sides of his head, starts pounding his skull into the sidewalk. And believe me, you could hear it. Thunk, 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 using Jisoo's 80-pound body as a seat while he did so. I hadn't seen any of this, was coming down the steps with Dev and DK just as the blood circle closed around them, maybe 30 kids punching the air and screaming murder. I'm sure lots of schools go a week without one instance of felony assault, but at IS 75, it's practically a ritual. Maybe that's why it took just seconds to fight through to ringside. That's when we saw them. The kid on top in a sheepskin coat so stiff it restricted his arms, so he had to lean way over Jisoo's face, like he was going to kiss him, but for maximum head-pounding impact. And underneath, you couldn't really see, but I recognized the red Jansport with the peace symbols everywhere. I'd inked a few myself, flung by what had to be Jisoo's head. That's when I saw Hei-jin. She'd been pushed back by the bloodlusters and was fighting to break through the circle, but didn't have a chance. The look on her face I'd never seen before. She was terrified. I didn't even think. I tore through the circle and dove headfirst into the sheepskin coat, slamming into the kid's back like it was 4th and goal from the 1, knocking him off, and there's no way I could have planned this, onto his own back and kind of under me. Well, I wasn't going to let him up, so I plopped my butt on his solar plexus and grabbed him by the hair, gave him a little of the old sidewalk treatment. It was very educational. I learned when you've got all your weight over someone's heart, there's not much they can do. Also that even blunt objects like sidewalks can cause a surprising amount of blood loss. Dev said when Goldberg tore me off, I was telling the kid how lucky he was I'd come along to save him years of karmic retribution. You're gonna thank me one day, supposedly the last thing I said as I rammed his cranium rhythmically into the concrete. I don't remember that at all. Is there anything else you can tell us? Ross asked when Jisoo finished. He thought about it, started shaking his head, but then in the softest voice you ever heard said, just that I thought I was gonna die. For maybe 5 seconds, the room was silent. Jisoo's dad, standing beside him, patted his son's shoulders. Mr. Park wasn't the demonstrative type, so I knew this was big. For a moment, I thought I might actually make it out of there unscathed, but then Goldberg roared to life with an accusing finger. He had no business jumping in. He could have killed someone. You should have come to us, Ross shook. Do you realize that boy's in the hospital? Sasha, Andrea started with the saddest look on her face, and for a second I thought I was wrong, that she was just there to kowtow to the impromptu justice machine. That could have been you. I know you were worried about your friend, but do you understand how dangerous that was? It's funny. The whole time I was locked in that waiting room, all I could think was, I guess this is it. I lasted 2.5 years in the program with some of the brightest kids in the city, and in the end, I guess it was too much. So this is how it ends. Not once did I think about danger or getting hurt. I was trying to help. But then, for the first time since I walked in the office, Mr. Park spoke up. Dangerous. Yes. Let me tell you how much. What the rest didn't know was Mr. Park had been an orthopedic surgeon in Seoul. He wasn't licensed to practice in the States, language being the major barrier, so he worked at Long Island Jewish, where for the past 9 years he'd been a janitor, sterilizing OR floors. It just happened to be his one day off, which was why he'd come so quickly. Dr. Park painted a graphic picture of what might have happened if I'd run for help instead of jumping in as I had, beginning with the little-known fact that women have thicker skulls than men, over 0.5 millimeter on average. This just one of many hardware differences between the sexes, and Jisoo, being a smaller than average boy, would be lucky to have 6 millimeters of occipital bone between his brain and the sidewalk. Dr. Park explained the neurological implications of this, reviewed what tests would need to be run soon, probably today, and assured everyone the team at Long Island Jewish had already been notified of the situation and were raring to go. Considering the many violent episodes in this school's past, he couldn't believe there wasn't more supervision, that such a brutal assault had been allowed to go on unchecked, and the only reason his son wasn't hospitalized was because of a 14-year-old who just happened to be there and give a crap. He ended with this promise: if you punish this boy in any way, he came behind my chair then, squeezing my shoulders until it hurt, and left his hands to rest there, heavy, when he was done. I will sue. So yeah, I stayed in the scholars program, by the 2 millimeter skin in my teeth. That was Thursday. 3 days later, it's Palm Sunday, a week before Easter. Needing all the sleep I can get, of course, I wake ridiculously early. It's 3:39 in the morning and I'm fully alert. I try tricking myself to sleep with a story, but as if I have no control whatsoever, the story keeps veering to an enraged Dean Goldberg ripping his collar open at the neck so he wouldn't have an aneurysm and storming from the office, past Principal Ross's extended sympathetic hand. Andrea, frozen in place, didn't notice. You almost got the impression she was the one who'd been pardoned. On the 10-minute drive home, Mom didn't say a word, other than to tell me to pick up Benji when we pulled in the drive. He's a great kid, always happy to see me, and as I carried him home in my arms, we made a game where I picked bits of spinach off his face and stuck them on his hands, making him squeal. When we got back, Mom was already in the bedroom, door closed, and would be for hours. My own hours slugged by on a trail of slime. At 5:13 a.m., I know it isn't happening. Sometimes you can trick sleep, but you can rarely force it. Across the bedroom, Benji's out, soft cooing in his crib. The sound of my little brother relaxes me somewhat, enough anyway that I decide it won't hurt to look. Sliding out of bed, I reach under the mattress. It's dark, and when I don't feel it at first, I panic. But then, like early in a dream that could still go either way, I've got it in my hand and slip it out. It's a marble composition book, black and white, nothing special, but it's filled with dates and numbers in the neatest print I could manage, whole pages going back over 2 years. Mom found it once and asked what it was. I told her it was a reading log. I hadn't cracked a book in weeks. Flipping to the end, I hold it up to the alarm clock, check the last entry in the digital glow. 6.5 days ago, I brought myself to orgasm after holding out a whopping 36 hours. Before that, I'd managed 3 days without sputzing. Before that, 58 minutes. My personal worst, he couldn't hard-boil an egg. Pathetic. As I lie back on the floor in the dark, hugging my masturbation log, my mind turns improbably to monks. I've been reading this book I found in Dad's office. It's called the Philokalia, and don't ask me what that even means. It was compiled like 1,000 years ago by hermits slumming in the Egyptian desert. What it is, basically, is a training manual for monks. It's like their how-to guide for waging war with the devil. The funny thing, what you'd never expect from a bunch of dudes in hair shirts, is that in their minds, they were warriors. I'm talking knight in shining armor, Lancelot-level badassery, the tip of the spear in God's eternal war against evil. Basically, a lot of these guys had giant freaking egos. I guess when you give up food, wine, sex, sleep, companionship, and regular bathing, you need something to keep you going. For a lot of these monks, it was their massive, unwashed heads. It's funny how people will surprise you, I think, replacing my lust log and heading down to Theo's basement office. The philokalia is on his desk where I left it, its cover the lightest shade of blue. Angel blue, they call it, but I'm not here for that. Pinching a random paperclip, I pick the lock on Theo's file drawer, which slides open as I click his banker's green desk light. In a house with 18 rooms, you'd think there'd be some options, and a priest would be more careful about hiding his porn. I guess Theo never tried picking his own lock. Once when I was little, I came down one Saturday night while he was writing the Sunday sermon. And through the small crack the slightly open door made, I saw him, red-faced and gaping, hunched awkwardly, nearly face down on the desk. I had no idea what I was seeing, but had seen enough, and raced right up the dusty flagstone steps. He must have heard me. He yelled that he was working. You could hear him through the floorboards. I never interrupted him again. You've got to admit, the man's got a decent collection, ever expanding with impressive variety. There are clubs and hustlers and penthouse forums for that literary wank, and some whose names you can't read since the letters are hidden by brazen carnal acts right on the cover. In the magazine displays, they paste over them with yellow stickies. Give Theo credit. I'm always afraid to touch one. There are dozens of magazines here, glossy and shockingly graphic, with, I see, several new issues mixed in. But thumbing through the stack, I don't find what I want. For a moment, I'm afraid Father Theo's recycled his stash. But there it is, last year's September Playboy, with you-know-who on the cover, advertised as the last issue made with staples. It's a collector's item. You can tell from the sheen Theo doesn't read it much. Any sign he did would ruin it for me completely. Checking the door, I closed it and the others won't be up for hours. I breathe and sit back in the button-tufted leather chair. Shocking. Just the sight of an executive desk gets me pulsy. Here's the thing about Madonna. I know people say horrible things about the way she dresses, how her videos should be rated X, and she should be ashamed for posing in Playboy, and is anyone even a little shocked she did? But I swear there's a tender beating heart to those ballads she sings. Hearing them, I forget my favorite band's Iron Maiden. Take Crazy for you, pure feeling, total emotion. Two people fall in love as they dance, timeless and tasteful. As if to prove it, her Playboy spread is modest, black and white, with emphasis on her face. My favorite shot of all barely shows anything, one boob, and I hardly look at that. It's her face I want to see. How her fingers curl over her mouth as she looks into the camera without the slightest hint of fear. It's uncanny. She's nude but shows no fear at all. Honestly, she reminds me of Andrea. When I close my eyes, I can see her with that expression. I know looking into the camera so deeply she saw herself wouldn't scare her. Not the Andrea I know. The one who went to Dr. Park after that big office showdown and thanked him two-handed as if he'd saved her future. She didn't care that everyone was watching either, Principal Ross and Mom, looking like she'd just seen her perfect up. There's a crashing sound. When I come to, I see I've dropped the magazine. But that's all right. I've got what I needed. Slipping Madonna back in her rightful slot, I lock up, trash the paperclip now twisted. No need to leave Theo clues. And on my way out, tap the philokalia 3 times in thanks. The monks will understand. At the end of the hall is the basement bathroom. The rectory has 3, but the basement's the one with the best water pressure. As I lock the door behind me, there's already a face in my mind, a hybrid Madonna-Andrea creature so real, so vivid, you can practically smell her mascara. I have to work my shorts down carefully since I'm already hard. One crank and the water roars steaming hot, the shower curtain sliding with a single well-placed genital push. But just as I'm about to step into steam glory, I notice something on the sink. It's got to be the largest tub of Vaseline I've ever seen, industrial-sized if that's possible. Funny, Can you believe that over hundreds of pages cataloging years of struggle against self-pleasure, I've never, not once, tried a masturbatory aid? What would Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain say? Not much, I guess. He's dead. So I gouge a chunk of gloop and have a go. Stepping into the water, I realize I should have checked the time in Theo's office for later logging. Over 2 years, I've never forgotten once. But then my hand lands, familiar but new, and I forget everything. Overcrowded schools with apartheid systems and low-track kids who want to kill you, who throw milks at you in the cafeteria because your sneakers have an extra stripe. And God forbid your science project ends up featured in the daily news under the truly sadistic heading, Local Genius Perplexes. They'll find out about it somehow. Maybe some clueless teacher will tell them, not realizing he's all but sealed your doom. And then good luck walking the halls without getting mushed in the back of the head about 10,000 times. When you get home, your back looks like afterbirth. Not to mention a distant, likely depressed mom and a 230-pound, violently wired father, a man, a priest who maybe shouldn't have had kids. And finally, a young researcher from Teachers College, Columbia U, who being sharp in every other way makes you feel miserably like you're a better version of yourself, a version hell would freeze over, you're sure of it, before you ever met him. My hand lands just as it has thousands of times before. I've got the book to prove it. But despite everything, even a third near expulsion that puts mom in bed for days, doing her best Sleeping Beauty impression while I scrape paste from Benji's cloth diapers, it still works. With one stroke, all the stress and grief and violence disappear. An hour later, everyone's up. Mom's in Larissa's bedroom, ripping snags from her hair. The poor kid's practically in tears. Benji's working a onesied foot over the wall of his crib. Soon he'll be climbing out to sleep with me. No sign of Theo. Great. I lock myself in the second floor bathroom, already dressed for liturgy. I'm the head altar boy, which means when Theo yells at someone, about twice on Sundays and once every Vespers, he yells at me. It isn't all bad. For one thing, he can't beat me with the whole parish watching. Might look bad if he lashed me with his stole. Plus, we drink wine back there like there's no tomorrow. Manischewitz, the sweet stuff. And since today's Palm Sunday, we'll be passing out pussy willows, which, what even is that? Some branch with furry little buds? Is that hair? Why would a plant have hair? And hair that looks, I can't believe I'm saying this, like the tiniest, puffiest, furriest little mons in all creation. Like if a Disney fairy, like Tinkerbell, lay on a branch to spread her tiny legs and before I know it, I'm ripping open my J.C. Penney slacks, the ones Gram bought, and to make sure they fit, stuck her hand up my crotch and tugged. It never fails. You go 6.5 days without touching yourself, then you break and you're on a freaking rampage. I look for Vaseline, but there's none. I don't think that'll be a problem. 12 strokes in, the pipes come alive. Someone's in the basement shower. I'm almost there. I can feel my urethra flaring, but as if I have no control over my thoughts, I have a flashback, one of many, to the last time Theo beat me after last spring's parent-teacher conference, when a teacher called me a clown to Theo's face. She probably said some other stuff, never studied, homework a rumor, but the C word was what did it. I know because that's all Theo screamed while he went at me. Funny, the same teacher once kicked Deb out of class for using a different C word, though he'd used it about himself, and far as I know, no one else heard. I guess a rule's a rule. On the first day of class, this teacher passed out a list of offenses, all the things we could do or say that would get us tossed out immediately to spend the day with Goldberg. Maybe clown should be on the list, at least when used around a 6'3", highly vindictive narcissist. I'm pretty sure Dev's C word didn't almost put someone in the hospital. After Theo was done, leaving me in a puddle of my own mess, just the vilest marinade you could imagine, the first thing he did was take a shower. Beating a teenage boy is hard work, even when he doesn't shit himself. It must have felt good to wash off the lather he'd worked himself into, have all that poison run neatly down the drain. And that's when I see it. You see, I have a gift, a special ability I've never told anyone about. It sounds crazy, but I'm psychic in one very limited way. I can sense, maybe 10 seconds before it happens, any impending disaster involving me. I won't have time to avoid it, but I'll know it's coming. For a minor eternity, I am pure, unadulterated freakout. Like clockwork, maybe 10 heartbeats in, just as I'm blowing ropes, I hear it, a brute animal scream, racing up the pipes from the basement to resound in the very room where I have my pud in my hand. Yes, still Vaseline slick. Where's that kid? For a beat, the house freezes. Then it's pandemonium. Mom, who I haven't seen run since Benji fell in the pool at one of our Long Island parishioners' pool parties, is charging downstairs, leaving Larissa in the heat, half dressed and crying on her bed. Benji's made it out of the crib and is knocking on the bathroom door. He knows I'm here, kids are smart, and is asking what happened. And even though I'm 2 floors away, door locked, mirror fogged with my breath, I see it all, down to the slipperiest detail. Somehow, that gob of Vaseline I used never washed away. It sat at the bottom of the tub. Should I have checked? Did I use too much? With buddies, you joke about these things, but no one's sharing recipes, counting out teaspoons and such. Come to think of it, that was a pretty big gob, 3 fingers easy. How I didn't slip, I have no idea. It's funny the things that happen that we call lucky. For Theo, not so much. Turns out he twists when he falls, producing a spiral fracture of his tibia, which pokes through his skin just enough to bleed into the water. If you're keeping score, that would make it a compound spiral fracture. It takes 2 paramedics and a couple firemen to pull him out, drenched and naked, but wrapped in a Miami Vice shower curtain for modesty, screaming things you'd never imagine hearing from a parish priest. It takes them 10 minutes just to haul him up the narrow granite-walled stairs, which, God, can you imagine the echo? For the first time in 18 years, St. Simeon's has to cancel liturgy. Those poor pussy willows all go to shit. And Theo, in his words, in a cast from my ankle to my ass, has to conduct Holy Week services from a chair. If you've never been through an Orthodox Holy Week, it's about 40 hours of the most dour, lugubrious ceremony you ever heard. They say Dostoevsky, another priest's kid, actually started Crime and Punishment after bailing on Holy Thursday, running out midway through the epic reading of the 12 Gospels. I wonder if he kept a log. By Easter, you're ready for a new life. So yeah, that was my Palm Sunday, and I'm still not over that coincidence. I'm only here because Theo can't murder me with a cast. According to the doctor, an orthopedist, I've got 6 months to live. Serves me right. I knew those monks were onto something. Thank you very much. While I've got you all here, I'd like to thank Valerie for the lovely introduction. Bill Miller, thanks. 2 years was the charm, wasn't it, Bill? Janice Lee, thank you for reading for the Sparks Prize. Thanks to Steve Tomasula for good writing advice. Thanks to my students, the few who came tonight, for being ever inspirational. And thank you to Nicholas Sparks for giving me a second chance with a novel I've wanted to write for a long time. I know what happens to many first novels, and this book may never make its way into print, but thank you all for listening tonight. Have a great summer.
Thanks so much, Greg. That was amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sure there aren't any questions after that. I wrote it expecting stunned silence. That's the effect I was going for. So maybe we can call it all a night and just go out for dinner, huh?
Deal.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Take care.